Hey, good morning. Welcome to the number one multifamily radio show. Hey, this is episode number 2. So for our early morning audience and the people that registered and signed up, welcome. Carl, say hi to everybody real quick.
Hey, how is everybody? Good morning.
Good to see everybody. Hey, thanks for registering. And I want you to know and remember this, that the first time you register, that gives you admittance to all the time. So you won't have to register again. So once you're registered, you're good to go. And we use the same link every week. So just keep coming back and enjoy yourself.
Does that include me too, Mike? Do I have to register again? No, I'm kidding.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what? I may just make you register again next time. So, hey, listen, we want to just let you know we're here for you, for the listeners, right? Unplugged radio, raw, unscripted. We're giving you all of our knowledge, everything that we have on a platter for you. So, questions, anything you need, make sure you drop them in the chat and we will be getting, get your questions answered. And what I want you to know is if we don't get them answered on that particular show, that we'll carry them over. Today, we're going to talk about 2 questions that we didn't get to last week. So, hey, Carl, why don't you give a little introduction of yourself, let people know who you are and why you're here.
Yeah. Well, good to see you, Mike. Too bad we didn't get together yesterday, but we'll definitely have to, we talked earlier, we'll have to get together.
Yeah, for sure.
Next week, I think we should come together. Yeah, so for those of you that don't know.
You have to bring lunch.
Yeah, you keep telling me that. I'll bring lunch, no problem. If I show up at the door with no lunch, you won't answer the door.
That's right. I won't let you in.
Yeah. No, my name's Carl Gordon Moose. I go by C. Gordon Moose. And for those of you that don't know me, my experience in multifamily is I was a banker. I worked for Washington Mutual. I was one of the first original apartment lending guys for Washington Mutual. And then I worked for LaSalle Bank and a number of others. And, I was financing multifamily deals, small multifamily deals. And over the course of about 8 years, I saw people build portfolios, starting usually with one building, which is where I know you started, Mike. You had thousands of units, right, at one point?
Yeah, at one point we did, yep.
Yeah. So, I was watching them do these deals and find the deals and analyze the deals and get them financed. And then finally I got involved and bought a building and then we ended up buying about 22 buildings. So we had a nice little portfolio going, but that's my background. And then, you see in the background here, your focus guy, I've got a program all about finding, maintaining, and sustaining focus. So, which if you're gonna get into real estate, that's an important thing. You really want to focus on that. I know when you work with people, Mike, that's where you start. You really start with what they want to focus on. So,
yep. And that's the thing that I like about what you do is you take people down that path of, hey, let's find out what's important and why that's important. And I believe once you know why, everything, the how happens, right? The how is easy, it's simple. So, I like what you do, and I love the name of your company, your focus guy. It just kind of really zones people in on what they need to think about.
Yeah, and I know, I know that I've known each other for many, many, many years, and I know you were focused on what you did. You bought a certain kind of property, a certain kind of asset, and you became very good at that. So,
right.
Why don't you share a little bit about that, Mike, so people get to know who you are?
Yeah, you bet. Thanks. So, I've been in real estate for well over 30 years, and that kind of pushes my age a little bit, but I started out selling real estate, and I was a typical real estate agent and didn't know much, went into the business and shadowed a guy and learned from him. And he told me to go after the for sale by owner market. And that's probably one of the scariest places for a real estate agent to be. And here's what I equate that to, though. That's why I talk about this, is because for an investor, for a multifamily investor to be looking for off-market deals, sometimes it can be a fearful thing because you're talking to people you don't really know. It takes you out of your comfort zone. It takes you out of your box. And that's why some training in that can help people do it, and just not just the training, but then the execution and doing it over and over again, right? So, I talk about that because my first year in real estate, I sold 78 houses to people I didn't know. And I was RE/MAX Rookie of the Year that year. We went on to build a team, sell, 125 homes a year, all listing. Didn't work with buyers. I really gave a lot of business away just because I didn't work with buyers. And then I went in the apartment business. I raised several $1 million, bought 4,000 apartments. We owned and managed those, and we managed about 5,000 other units. So I built a small property management company there doing that. We unwound all that and sold that property management company. I went and built another property management company and sold that one. And today I've taken all my years of knowledge and experience, packaged it, put it on one platform to coach and train other people, because I think it's really important, that whole philosophy. And, my philosophy is success leaves clues. So let's stay, on that path. Hey, there's a couple things that I want to mention this morning.
Yeah.
If I can just take a minute. First, I want to mention it's my sister's birthday today. And I just want to wish Mary a happy birthday, and I hope that she enjoys her day and everything about it. So it's going to be a beautiful sunny day today. So I hope she enjoys that.
Is she in Chicago too?
She is.
Okay.
Yeah, she lives in the Crystal Lake area. So
That's nice. That's a nice area.
Yeah. The other thing is, why this is so cool on Saturday morning is because it's totally unscripted. We don't have anything planned. We don't have any agenda. We just want to talk about multifamily. We want to give people information and knowledge that you and I both have that we can share with others, right? So if you're listening, I just want you to know that what we deliver is for you. So if you have questions, if you need something, if you've got a question you need answered, drop it in the text or in the chat box. Just send us a chat. We'll get to your question. If we don't get to your question, we'll get to it by the end of the over the next week. But we will get to your questions. So, and then during the week, you can email Carl with your other questions, because Carl has great answers for that stuff. So
what? Usually, don't careful what you promise, Mike. But no, I'm sure between the two of us, we can answer the questions. So
you bet.
Want to answer the questions from last week first, or I know you had another topic you mentioned you want to talk about.
Yeah, you want me to? Why don't we talk about this real quick? Let's just see. Here's what I found was in the news this week. So I did some research. Nothing exciting happening. Nothing with interest rates or anything crazy like that. Looks like things are still pretty plateaued. Nothing's going crazy. So, but here's what I found was interesting: is Airbnb is coming to the market again for the second time. They just filed their paperwork with the Securities and Exchange Commission to go public. Right. And why I find that interesting is because they tried it once before. I want to say it was about 12 or 14 months ago, and they couldn't get it done. And I'm not really clear, and they weren't really clear in the news about why they couldn't get it done. But it's interesting that they're back after it. Now, you can look at this a couple of different ways. I think from an economist standpoint right now, there's a lot of economists that are looking at this season that we're in with this epidemic, saying that they don't know what's going to happen, that we might not have seen the worst in the real estate space or in the investment space for 6 months. If anybody watched the Democratic convention, and not to get political, and we're not going to get political on this show, but Biden made a comment the other night that after the election, this will all just go away. So it kind of makes you think, wow, really? Just like that, it'll just go away. Right. Why couldn't that just happen today? But when you take Airbnb, who says, hey, we're going to risk this now, we're going to go public. I talked to a guy the other day, who an investor that I work with, who is an Airbnb investor. And he buys property, puts them on Airbnb, and single family homes in the rental range of about $3,500 a night. And I asked him, I said, what, are people buying? He goes, our stock homes are off the charts right now. He says that we have more people renting from us right now than we've had in the past. And the rental prices have accelerated. He said this house for $3,500 a night was going for about $2,800 a night 6 months ago. Huh. So, he said, and we can't find a break to get a cleaning person in there.
Wow. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a couple of clients that they're in the Airbnb space here in Chicago. They bought They bought some historic mansions, beautiful, beautiful old Danish Burnham mansions, gorgeous. I mean, 7,000 square feet, fully furnished, and I think they have about three or four of those, and they're doing okay. But that's a tricky business. Do you have any experience in that, Mike? Do you have any experience in the Airbnb or?
Not in Airbnb, but I'll tell you, you know what I was just thinking about? Years ago, there used to be a model that was a business model, right? So corporations, there was corporate housing, right? There was a company in Chicago called Habitat, and not your Habitat for Humanity that builds houses. What a great cause that is. But these guys bought units in, like, I remember they owned about 40 units in presidential towers.
Yeah, I remember that.
And what they did was they leased them to Motorola, to, United Airlines, to the major corporations in the area that would have people come in, short-term rentals, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And those were for a couple of weeks at a time, 30 days at a time, things like that. And they since are very quiet. I don't think that that model works. When you talk about real estate models, it's like when I built my multifamily acquisition company, right? That model was, we raised private equity, we matched it with a great real estate deal and a bank deal, and we ran and operated those deals. That's kind of what their model was too. They raised money, private and institutional money, but that model was short-lived.
yeah. I
It's
remember.
not.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I remember them. It's
Yeah.
it's interesting for any of you that are listening, and Mike and I, we have a wide range of experience. Mike's owned, obviously more units than I ever owned, but for those of you that are maybe new, or thinking about, because I had a conversation with a couple people this past week, and they're like, yeah, one gentleman was saying that he's probably not going to buy anything for a couple years, and I said, well, why don't you come join us Saturday mornings? If nothing else, you're going to join the community and learn a few things. And I said, if you want, you might realize that you can do it sooner than later. My point is, if you're new at this, don't worry about it. I mean, one of the ways to gain some knowledge and network with other people that have experience, which is one thing I didn't do. When I jumped in all by myself. I bought an 18-unit building. I took on partners, but they were lawyers. They didn't know anything about real estate, so they depended on me, and I made a lot of mistakes. So, if you're new to real estate, stick with us. You know what I mean? Because you're gonna get some information and some experience, and you'll be able to network. If you're a little bit more experienced, we can talk about things like Mike was just talking about. There's a lot of different models. Airbnb is one model. We looked at self-storage at one point, right? That's another model. You just mentioned the Habitat model, right? There was a gentleman I worked with years ago. He had a company called Beds for Meds.
Mm.
And what he would do, Mike, he would go to different cities like Chicago, Cleveland with the Cleveland Clinic, where the Mayo Clinic is up in Minnesota. I think it's Rochester. He would buy 6 or 8 unit buildings, right? He would furnish them, and they had parking, and I think he actually had cars at a couple of these. And what he would do is he would rent them out on a weekly basis to people that were doing an intern at the medical center. So doctors, as you know, they have to do a 6-month or a year residency, I think is what it's called. And so they would come in for a short period of time. But the brilliant thing about his model was he would force 13 months of rent out of a 12-month calendar, because he would rent it in 2-week intervals. So a lot of times somebody would come in and they might leave in the first week, but they'd still pay for 2 weeks of rent, right? Or somebody else might come in on, at the second week, but they would have to pay for that 2-week interval. My point is, he had a really interesting model with multifamily that forced 13 months of rent out of a 12-month calendar. And as a banker, we loved it. We're like, oh my, his debt service was low. His, all his ratios were well within our underwriting criteria because of what he did. So my point is, there's a lot of different ways, to address and to, get into the multifamily marketplace. And that's one of the things I know that you love about the space. And it's one of the things I love about the space, because even with the experience that you and I have, there's always something new to learn, or something else to investigate.
Yeah. So, what's kind of interesting is, you mentioned a couple of things. First, you mentioned self-storage, and I love self-storage. If I was to go and do it again, I might do it. It's a very small space.
Yeah.
It's kind of tough to get into, but there are thousands of mom and pop shops all across the country. And a lot of these people want to get out. And that's what made some of the big boys as big as they are right now, because they
Oh, yeah.
bought those, right? But look at reconversion efforts for shopping centers and malls and things like that that are going to go out of business. You know, there's a company, I think it's Life Storage, that has done those reconversion deals on old Kmart's and stuff like that. But anyhow, here's why I like self-storage, right? Two reasons. You don't get calls in the middle of the night for plugged up toilets or lost keys. And when somebody doesn't pay their rent, you don't have to jump through a bunch of hoops. You lock it. If they don't pay, you auction it and you rent it to somebody else. It's very simple. It's a great model, right? And that beds for meds guy, I knew a guy that, and you and I've had this conversation, but I had that client of mine that did that too. Here's why that model works so well, because your turnover cost is so low, right? First, there's a demand. Those guys in those last couple of years of school and their internship are never home. So there's no wear and tear on the unit. You go about 3 years before you have to do any, major turn on them. In between tenants, you can walk in and clean it and take a magic sponge to the walls and light switches, and it looks like you painted it and it's brand new.
Yeah.
So it's your overall cost is so much lower. And then what I really, we're talking about these models, right? And this shows about multifamily. Just look at the multifamily space and look at the models inside of multifamily. If you're listening this morning and you have a pen and paper, you might want to write some of this down. Because when we talk about models, first of all, you got classes. You got A, B, C, and D class, right? Your A class product is your brand new stuff. That's typically owned by your hedge funds, by your insurance companies, by teacher pension funds, things like, organizations like that, because it's got a built-in coupon, right? So you're going to get 4% guaranteed every month, month after month. And why an insurance company likes a deal like that is because they can pay their investor 3%, keep a percent, and they're happy all day long. And they can own, hundreds of millions of dollars of real estate that performs like that. Your cost of entry is much higher, but your cost of repair is much lower. And then you got all the way on the other end of the spectrum of that too. Just think that through. But you have your market rate rentals, you have your A-class rentals, you have your affordable housing, your tax deals, your senior living, your hotel space. There's a lot of different platforms within the multifamily space. If you're a new multifamily investor going into the business or trying to make a transition from an asset class that maybe you're doing small multifamily or single family, write down every different type of product that's in that class and think about each one and decide what you want to go into. I always stayed in the market rate multifamily space. Here's why. I didn't like new construction. It took too long to start generating money. I wanted to walk away from a closing table knowing that I had income coming in. And that didn't happen in the single family space. It didn't happen in the new construction space, but I could buy a B-class product in a B-class neighborhood, walk away generating income from closing that day. And that was important to me as well as it was important to my investors, right?
Yeah. So Mike, so I know, some of the people out there may not know, just real quickly, market rate. Tell them what market rate is.
Market rate is what, your typical working class apartment would go for. So, if the average price on the market is $1,000 a month, that's what market rate is.
Right.
You get into anything higher than above market rate, you're in those A-class product and they're 2,000 a month or better. I'm just using ballpark numbers right now.
Yeah. So, and as you mentioned, the advantage is literally you walk out of closing, you got a bag of keys, the building is yours, and the income starts flowing to you, immediately. I mean, when people start to pay their rent that month, or
Right.
and I'm oversimplifying it because, as there's more that goes into it. But the point is, you liked it because it started, you didn't have to wait to sell the property, right? You didn't have to wait to to lease it up. If you're, I'm assuming that these were stabilized properties, right? And you didn't have to wait until the construction crew got done, right? I mean,
Right.
you walked in. So, that's certainly one strategy. So what
Hey,
you,
I have a friend. I have a friend who's made a fortune in new construction. So don't get me wrong. If you like that and you want to take the time, I mean, but by the time you buy ground, it's typically 5 years before you start seeing income come in. In my book, that's an alligator, and that alligator could eat you alive, right? But there's people that have made a ton of money in that space. I got a buddy right now. They're planning to build a 187 unit hotel, and it's going to take them, they know that it's going to take them about 42 months to start producing revenue.
yeah.
So
Well, and that is a different model. I mean, in Chicago, they say it takes $1 million before you even break ground. I mean, by the time you do architects, zoning, all the planning, all that. So it's a different, it's definitely a different model, 100%.
yeah.
So, and for me, and I always tell people, because people do ask me, I don't have a formal training program like you have with regard to real estate. Mine is more about focus, but people do ask me, what's the best way to get in? And I tell them, well, if you're just getting into it, keep it simple, and getting into a 2 or 3 or a 4 flat, or like you and I like to say 2 to 4 to 6, right? Those are a lot easier to manage, easier to finance, easier to analyze than a big 160 unit building. And again, and I know you talk to people about this too when you work with them, about the risk, right? Like, what's your risk tolerance? How much risk can you afford, and can you tolerate? And as you mentioned, at alligator, why do you call it an alligator, right? Because it's moves slow and it can literally eat you alive, right? And so,
Yeah, right.
not everybody has that risk tolerance, right?
Yeah, that's for sure. Hey, you know what? God, I can't believe we burned through 25 minutes already. Let's start talking about a couple of these questions. And I just want to tell anybody on the call, if you have a question, throw it in the chat this morning. So if you need anything from us or anything answered, anything you're working on or trying to do, put it in the chat this morning. But let me read through this one from last week, okay?
Yeah.
So a question for cash needed to invest in a small multifamily. Take Chicago for an example. So this listener was asking what she needs for cash in a multifamily. Now she gives two scenarios here. If I buy a 3 flat in good condition, it will cost about 900,000. If I do 30% down, I need 270,000. And the second part is, people told me I can buy a $500,000 3 flat and spend 200,000 to fix it up. Then I'm looking at 150 to 200,000 in renovation expenses. So now I need 350,000. And I need to take the risk of having a bad contractor and a property won't be fixed for 6 months while I'm paying mortgage, tax, expenses, etc. Why are so many people buying properties in bad shape and fixing them up and renting them out? And I think what she's asking here is that, it's costing her more money out of pocket. It's costing more time than just to buy something that's already fixed up. She's less money out of pocket, less time, and then back to my model, right? You walk in, she leaves closing, it's already fixed up, put tenants in it right away, can start collecting money right away. But boy, I have a lot to say about this. You want to start?
Yeah, and I mean, I think it's a great question, and I think a lot of people look at that and they look at what other people are doing, and they see other people having success, or at least what they a lot of times you don't see the whole picture, right? They tell you what they want you to know, and they look and say, well, yeah, I'm going to buy a beater and fix it up, and then make a fortune. And again, I think the thing to consider, Mike, and I know I'm preaching to the choir with you, but really, what's your risk? What is your model, and what are your risk factors, right? And what's your risk tolerance? Because again, if you're looking to buy a 3 flat and live in the 3 flat and rent out the other 2 units to pay your expenses, that's a different scenario than being a flipper. You know what I mean? So it really, that's really the something you want to consider. You know, what are your risk tolerances and what is the model that you want to pursue? Because as you and I both know, Mike, you know, there's whatever model you choose, there's tons of opportunity. There's always opportunity out there. So, you know, don't chase the opportunity, zero in and focus on your model, and then let the opportunities come to you. That's what I'd have to say about that.
Yeah. And that's a great point. You know, there's a bunch of stuff that I just want to comment on this. First of all, it's amazing to me that it's about 250, it's actually $300,000 a door at 900 grand for that building, right? Um, and it's amazing to me that pricing has gotten that out of control, because I think it's ridiculous. It's really way too high. And I don't care what neighborhood it's in or what it is. I just can't see buying that. I mean, that would have to be state of the art, smart, green, everything you can possibly imagine for that kind of floor price, right? You know,
But they're out there, you know, it's,
no, I know they're out there, but you know what? Listen, you and I both know that we can go to the bank and we can buy something. We can buy a 3 flat for 50 grand.
yeah.
Okay. So it depends on where you want to spend your time and the risk, your risk tolerance too. So you're not going to buy something for 50 grand in that neighborhood. Like she said, it's probably 500 for something that needs to be fixed up.
Right, right. Well, that, you know, you bring up a good point, Mike, because I know, I'm sure, you know, that you had criteria when you would analyze a property. And this is a very important point. We did the same thing. We had about 10 different things that we would look at. It was a checklist, right? And we used a checklist, just like a pilot. You know, a lot of people don't realize this. I fly little planes. I don't care how experienced you are. If you're a fighter pilot or a 747 pilot, I don't care if you're day one in the seat or your last day of the seat. They go through a checklist, and they do that
Right.
for a reason. Well, we used to do that when we buy a property. I mean, we'd go through the checklist, and if it didn't hit the mark, we would walk away from it. And one of
Yep.
them was a range and price per door. You mentioned that, right? Price per door. And for those of you that may not be familiar with that term, it's, if you have a 3 flat, it's very simple math. If you have a 3 flat, you have 3 doors, right? You're just not talking about front and back door. You're just talking about a door as a unit, right? And so you would divide 900 by 3, and that's where you come up with 300,000 a door. And I'm with you, Mike. There's no way I'd buy that property for 300 a door, because I know there's other properties out there, you know, that you could get for far less. So that's just one criterion that you look at, and that's really important. That goes back to, you know, like what you you know, instruct your people when they work with you. You put them through that process, and you really get them focused on what it is they want to do.
So the chat's blown up a little bit, right? So I love this because we've obviously sparked a little something here. So, but she says that she looked pre-COVID, looked at a 3 flat, saw a 2 flat in Lincoln Park for 900, 2 units.
Yeah.
And you know, that's 450 a unit, right? So I get that they're out there. Here's what you need to look at. What are you buying that for? Are you going to live in one unit, and is the location that great and the finish is that great, and do you have the square footage and everything that you want? Great. And then you've got a little help coming in from somebody else that they're helping pay that mortgage, right? Even that 3 flat for 900,000. You know what? You've got rents coming in. Somebody else is paying the mortgage. Where's it going to go? But I believe that the people before us, you know, you talk about Sal all the time. Sal has a friend who I used to rent for years ago named Don. Okay. And Don owned about 40 buildings around Belmont and Racine, that near Cubs Park, Wrigleyville, right? He used to buy those buildings for about 38,000, and I know that he sold those about 250,000. And today, those pieces of property that have new buildings on them are $1 million buildings, right? And they're all 2 flat and 3 flats. So I get it. You know, who would have thought that the market would have done that either? And who knows where it's going to go in the next 10 years from now. But here's what I want to know. First of all, do you really need to put 30% down if you're going to live in it? You know, can you put less down? Can you get the seller to participate? Can you be a little creative? Are there other, so you talk about your pilot's checklist, right? Let's go through the checklist of ways of buying and purchasing that work. I think the question here is, should I buy the 900,000 or buy the 500,000 because my risk is less on the one that's already fixed up, and my I don't have to wait for a bad contractor and wait to get things rented up and be off the market and out of pocket for 6 months, right? And again, this goes back to risk tolerance. What do you want to accomplish, and what's your own risk tolerance? And I think you have to walk through that, and you have to think it through and say, listen, hey, what if I get a good contractor and it only costs me 150,000 to fix it up, and it only takes me 3 months? Now I'm money ahead, right?
Yeah.
So, but if you look at those numbers at 502, that's 700. And even if it cost you 100,000 in closing costs, you're still in that deal less all in costs than you are for the $900,000 deal. Just
No, I totally understand what you're saying, Mike. And it really depends on what your model is. I mean, if that's your model of, fixing, buying something, fixing and flipping it, but here's the only thing, what I've learned, and I'm sure you can relate to this, Mike. My experience, not only when I was a banker funding these deals, but also when we were operating and buying ourselves, everything takes twice as long and costs twice as much. That's my rule of thumb. If someone comes in and says they can do it in 6 months, I say it's going to be a year. If they tell me it's 100 grand, I say it's going to be 2, right? And so that's a very conservative. But remember, I was trained as a banker. Bankers are very conservative, right? And so we always applied that rule. We said twice as long, twice as much. So, be really careful when you're looking at a deal. Don't get emotional about it, right? I know this is one thing that's very important to your people too, Mike. Don't fall in love with the deal. Don't get emotional with it, and apply some of those standards. Because that's my experience. My experience is it takes twice as long and costs twice as much.
Always. So, hey, listen, for the listener who wrote that question, I don't know that there's a good answer. I think the answer is sit down, evaluate everything, bounce it off your coach, bounce it off your partner, bounce it off, your one of your peers. I believe, somebody else asked another question. For the next discussion, can we talk about finding partners and securing capital? And let me just talk about this real quick. Finding partners, building your network is really important as an investor. I don't care how long you've been in the business, whether you're just walking in the door brand new, or you've been in the business as long as you and I have, Carl. Continuing to network and continuing to build your investor pool is very important. That's why meetings like Meetup and those platforms, even virtually, are really important, because you get online, you get in these conversations with people, and those can carry outside of that meeting. Take the initiative and get somebody's email, follow up with them, start that conversation, because peers doing the same thing that you're doing, other investors, other brokers doing the same thing that you're doing, are going to help you grow, because we all learn from other ideas. I go back to my old saying, that I love real estate so much because there's always something to learn. And Carl, I even learn from you as much as you learn from me, because what happens when we talk about the power of the mastermind, right? And when you go and you put 2 or more people in a room, it creates that third entity of mind, right? And Napoleon Hill always talked about that.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And you make another good point. For those of you that don't have a lot of experience, you're not alone. You're not alone. You're not the only one that's going through, whatever feelings you're having, or whatever, experiences you're having. Sometimes we get into a mindset that this is only happening to me, right? I'm alone, right? And to your point, Mike, being connected to a network and networking with people is so key, I do, you're currently, don't you have something going on right now? Or did you fill up your course already, or no?
I did an early bird offer for a coaching program. I did it for a couple of reasons. We implemented some new software, and I wanted to make sure that the software was operable and working right. And it's not, but It kind of goofed up, but we're at least we know what we need to fix now on it. But yeah, here was the simple math around it, right? It was, I'm doing a group coaching program. I actually have one spot left, and it's a 90-day challenge. So what I'm doing is I'm putting together 5 people in a group coaching setting. We're going to have one group call per week, and they will have 2 individual one-on-one calls with me during each month. So every 2 weeks, we'll have a one-on-one call. It'll go on for 90 days. During that 90 days, we're going to talk about 9 key points. We're going to talk about why you're doing this, why you're in real estate, why you want to learn what you want to learn and do what you want to do. We're going to set some goals, and we're going to do execution. We're going to execute around, building your network and building your team. And I'm going to come back to that in a minute because I want to finish this question for this listener. And we're going to talk about, networking, team building, locating and sourcing deals, how to find good off-market deals. We're going to talk about negotiating, going to contract, funding, due diligence, the pre-evaluation, and the 5 traps that people fall into, right? So there's a pre-evaluation process that every investor should look at and go through these traps to make sure that you're doing the right thing, that pulling the trigger makes sense. Hey, you could look at this $900,000 building and fall in love with it. And all of a sudden, all your emotions are out of whack, and you're buying something because you're emotionally involved. Well, you don't want to go there. You want to stay out of that, right? You have to stay on an even slate, because as soon as we let our emotions get intact, we wind up in an ugly divorce. So that's why we have to settle down.
So the reason I mentioned that is I wasn't sure if you filled that up. I know you a couple of weeks ago you told me about that. So
yeah, no, I didn't fill it up. I have one slot left. So if somebody wants it, you could drop your name in the chat or just go to my website and sign up for it at mycoreintentions.com. It's it's $50 a month, so it's $150 for a 90-day coaching program. It's kind of unprecedented. So,
but they're going to also it's kind of you're also going to get some feedback from the students too, right? And from the you're creating a community, right? There's going to be a community of people there.
Correct. Yep. So let me finish this real quick. So finding partners. I think there's a number of ways to find partners and to network. It's about, first of all, continuing to network, and it's about putting yourself out there and asking. If you're networking with a real estate investor, ask them, hey, are you looking for a deal right now? Are you looking for a place to invest passively or put some money? I always say, if you have a good deal, money will show up. But if you have a great deal, money will really show up, right? So look for great deals. Put a great deal together, and finding money is not a problem. And you know what? If you ask Carl if he wants to invest in one of your deals passively, he might not, but he might know somebody who does and might be able to refer you to somebody else. So, think about the people in your life. How do you secure capital?
Well, before you go on, Mike, I think I've told the story before, but that's exactly what happened to me. That 18-unit building, I didn't have the money, right? I didn't have the money, and I put a contract on it because my mentor and coach told me to do that. So just if you want the property, right? So literally and I was freaking out. I'm like, I just wrote a contract for this property. I put $10,000 of my own money or whatever as earnest money. I didn't have a partner, right? I was at a networking event. I was having a conversation with a guy, just like you said. I said, yeah, I've got this building. He was like, what's going on? I'm like, well, I just put a contract on this building. I'm looking for a partner. I said, if you know anybody, he goes, oh, you should talk to my lawyer. He said, they're a group of lawyers that invest in multifamily properties. I said, I'd love to. I said, can you introduce me? Like tomorrow, send me an email. He goes, no, he's right here. He's right in the room. He literally walked me over to the guy. We had a conversation, and within 3 days, I had the money. So directly to your point, you'll find the deal and then put it out there. Talk to your community, and you're never going to get something you don't ask for. So that actually is how I bought my first building.
It's amazing how that works, right? So, you talk about, part of this question is how do you secure capital? Well, I think you have to first find the people that are willing to put capital in, and you'd be surprised who is or who does, who likes passive investing, right? Hey, on my website, I think it's a free resource. I'm not sure, but I have a guide to passive real estate investing. Small ebook I wrote. It's about 30 pages, but it gives you a bunch of ideas, bunch of tips. I listen. I think it's free. I'm not. We talked about putting a price on it, but I think that that never happened. So you could go there and get it. And even if we did put a price on it, I think it was like $3.97. So, and I'm not trying to sell it, but I'm trying to say that there's resources out there to help you do this, right? So, but networking is so critical in everything that we do. Talk to everybody. Get a business card that says, "Hey, I invest in real estate. How about you?" And put your phone number on it and give it to people, and see what comes of that. Who do you know? Hey, ask Aunt Sally. Hey, Aunt Sally, who do you know who invests in real estate? You'd be surprised who the people around us know. You
Yeah,
know, you
no, I agree with you 100%. And you can go to Vistaprint and get a card for $5. You don't even have to get a logo. But,
yeah,
the other
right.
thing, Mike, that we used to do, right? I would go to people and I'd say, what if? I'd say, if we find a 10-unit building, that's X, Y, and Z, right? If we find this, would you be interested in investing? And I used to make a list of people and say, yeah, if you find a deal like that, call me. I'd be interested in taking a look at that. So even before we found the deal, while we were looking for deals, we were also cultivating our stable or our bench of investors. And you can literally you can do that. You can go and say, listen, I'm looking at buying a 3-flat or a 4-flat, somewhere. If I find something like that, would you be interested in partnering with me? You'd be surprised, like you said, of how many people would say, yeah, I would be interested in that. Because remember, all the deals that we did, Mike, I didn't put any of my own money in, right? I work with investors on every single one of our properties, and most of those investors were people that had income from other sources, and they wanted to get into real estate because they wanted the benefits of owning real estate, but they didn't know how to do it themselves. So they partnered with me because I knew what I was doing, right? And so once again, there's different ways for you to work your way into real estate. Just sometimes you have to think a little bit outside the box, and it's never too early to start looking for deals or looking for investors.
Yeah. So let's, I know we're kind of getting close to time here. I want to touch on this one question though in the chat box. I want to purchase a 4-unit building in Oak Lawn, 499,000. Great neighborhood, low crime, close to my home, 10 bedrooms, 5 bathrooms. And it's a 4-unit, it's about 125 a unit, right? So it's a little bit different than Lincoln Park at 900,000 for a 3-flat, right? And Oak Lawn's a good area. It's a suburban area. It's a good area. So I think that's probably a great deal at $1.25 a unit, right?
Yeah.
Somebody
Well,
else says, great find. I've
yeah.
only been looking inside Chicago right now. I should expand. So somebody caught on to this, right, and said I should expand. I think the landlord claims that one unit is 2,300 and the other is 3,500 on that 9-flat that this person, or the 3-flat for 900,000 this person is looking to buy.
Well,
So
something to think about there. Remember a couple of things to consider is, somebody that's paying 3,500, there's only a small percentage of the population that can pay that kind of rent, number one, right? So, a larger percentage of population can pay, 900, 1,000, 1,100, maybe in that Oak Lawn area, right? Number one. Number two, remember this, you guys, this is a statistic. It's called, I call it the rule of 92, right? If someone's asking 500,000 for a property on average, that will sell for 92% of the asking price, right? Because remember, when their asking price is what they wish they'd get, right? Now, some people say, well, in a competitive area, there may be competitive bidding. I understand that. But on average, right, this is from all my years of banking, multifamily properties go for 92% of the asking, right?
right.
Now, again, there's some areas where you've got it's a bidding. You're in an auction or a bidding scenario where you've got to outbid somebody. I'm not talking about those. So when you look at that 500,000, remember there's room to negotiate. So just don't come in and at that asking price, because again, one of our criteria, Mike, we wouldn't pay more than 92%. So if there is a competitive bidding situation, we wouldn't get caught up in that, right?
Right.
We were like, that's what we're going to pay. We're going to pay the average percentage of asking price. And again, a lot of times we'd move on to a different property. So, that sounds like a pretty good deal. And the last point I want to make is, so what just happened? Someone put something in a chat and he got a reaction out of other people, right?
Yeah.
So in essence, he said that person, and we're not going to mention names because we don't like to do that. But the person said, I'm looking at this deal, and somebody else said, wow, that looks like a good deal. Well, when you're in a community of people, you're going to find people that say, wow, that sounds like a good deal. Maybe I should partner up with you. You know what I mean? So that's one of the other dynamics of being part of, like, the multifamily global summit community, right? That we're putting together.
Right.
Like, that community, you're going to find people within that community that are looking for what you may have already found.
Yeah, very true. Multifamily Global Summit will be coming up in October. But prior to that, there's a whole community that we're building out there on a Facebook page. So people can go there and just interact and network just like this, do a live post, do a post, however. So you can register if somebody wants to register for that. Again, we have a little software glitch right now that we're trying to work through, and we should have it taken care of this week. But if somebody wants to go to the summit, you can take advantage of early bird registration, and early bird registration is 20% off of either just your VIP or your VIP or your Facebook Live registration.
Yeah, did we open that up already? Are we starting to take registrations this coming week?
We are, yeah.
So if anybody's interested in getting some more information about that, it's going to be 3 days. We've got 15 speakers, I think.
20 speakers.
20 speakers. It's going to be 3 days virtual Zoom. It's going to be a great event. And the pricing, I think the pricing starts at $9. I mean, it's ridiculous. So
yeah,
if anybody's interested in getting some information about that, just put your email in the chat. If they do that, Mike, can we get the marketing people send them something?
Yeah, we'll have our marketing team send them something. Okay.
Yeah, if you're interested in getting some more information about that or registering, it's just put your email in the chat and we'll get you some more information, because I think that's in October, right?
It is October 15th, 16th, and 17th. It's 2.5 days of back-to-back action. And then, we'll be talking about, in the next couple of weeks, we'll be talking about some great VIP opportunities for that interactive Zoom platform. So,
and we're building a community, right? That's the other thing. This is more than just training. We're going to also build a community to moving forward. So
correct.
Right, do we have time for one more question or no?
We're about tapped out. We're at 50 minutes. So this morning is over. So
all right, but yeah, but put your questions in there, right? We'll get to them next week, right, Mike?
Yep, absolutely. We'll pick them up next week again, and we'll be here again next week. Make sure you tell all your aunts and uncles and everybody about us, and we'll be here, and look forward to talking to everybody next week.
Yep. All right,
Carl, good seeing you today.
Okay, have a good day. Tell your sister, I don't know your sister, but tell her I say happy birthday.
Oh, I will.
All right, you guys.
All right, take care. Have a great day.
See you later.